It is now 7:01. Time to start the October 27th, 2020 Planning Board meeting. First thing we'll do is have a roll call. I will mention in advance, though, due to COVID-19 restrictions, this meeting will be conducted remotely using the Zoom virtual meeting platform. Okay, we'll get started with the roll call, and I'll just ask you to give me a verbal yes when I call your name. Starting with Natasha Edwards.
Sorry, I couldn't find mute. Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Carrie Lamson.
Yes.
Jana Reeve.
Yes.
Mike Rowan.
Yes.
Jonathan Clayton.
Yes.
Jim Johnson.
Yes.
And Tom Dorsey.
Yes.
Okay. Everyone is in attendance. First order of business is approval of the minutes from the September 22nd meeting. Has everybody read through? I assume everybody has read through. Are there any questions or any changes that need to be made to the minutes? Okay. Seeing none, do I have a motion?
I motion we approve the minutes.
Okay. We have a motion from Jonathan Clayton. Do we have a second?
Second.
I think we have a verbal second from Mike. Okay. So I'll do a verbal roll call vote. Once again, does verbally give me yes or no, starting with Natasha Edwards.
Yes.
Carrie Lamson.
Yes.
Jana Reeve.
Yes.
Mike Rowan.
Yes.
Jonathan Clayton.
Yes.
And Jim Johnson.
Yes.
And I also vote yes, so that passes unanimously. We'll move to our first zoning application, which is zoning application 2020-716, FC Matthews. Text change request to allow independent living development in the RI zoning district. Rob, I guess this one's all yours tonight.
Yes, this one. I'm taking the first two, and Jay's got the last one. So good evening, everyone. Good to see everybody. And so this is a request for a text amendment to add what is defined as independent living facilities, which we already have the definition is already in the UDO. So but there's no corresponding item in the table of permitted uses. So this is to add to the permitted uses independent living facilities, which basically would allow age-restricted independent living units that are not a part of a continuing care community, retirement community, to be located in the RI district. The applicant has staff is comfortable with what the applicant has proposed. There was a concern raised at the board meeting, at the public hearing rather, that the number of amenities should be increased from 5 to 8, and staff is okay with that and has communicated that request to the applicant. Staff is comfortable with the proposed parking ratio because the argument that there will be fewer individuals living in the independent living facilities per unit than a regular multifamily development, 1 or 2 as opposed to an entire family. Staff suggests that the planning board forward a favorable recommendation of zoning motion 2020-716 text amendment to add independent living facilities to the table of permitted uses, add prescribed conditions, and to the parking requirement table to the Board of Commissioners as amended to increase the number of amenities from 5 to 8.
Okay. I noticed that we had some representatives from the applicant with us tonight.
This is Colin Brown, if you can hear me. Rob has done a nice job on the overview. But we have our entire team here. If you have any questions for us, we'd be happy to try and answer them.
Okay. First question I would have would be related to the amenities. You just heard that the planning team has recommended increasing the number of amenities from 5 to 8. Could you very quickly go over what you can address that obviously, but currently what you have listed as your 5 amenities, just as a refresher for us?
And I might turn that over to Kevin if you're available to let you guys know. We looked at several ordinances on. So what we are seeing now is a desire for independent living that's not part of a CCRC. And so the question is, well, what's the difference between an apartment building and this assisted living? And in the other ordinance we've seen, there's kind of this menu of options where these are amenities that are really tailored to seniors. And so what we try to do was come up with a list of options. I think, frankly, our team might be doing all of them, but we wanted some flexibility, just not so narrowly tailored for us. So Kevin or Jim, if y'all are on and want to pipe in, please do.
No, this is Jim.
Thanks.
Actually, I'm trying to get my video. I'll start my video. There we go. Hello everyone. Yeah, we have a little. We were hoping to have a little bit of flexibility in terms of the list of amenities, but we really feel like it shouldn't be a problem to meet almost all of these. So, but the idea is to basically have a little bit of difference from CCRC, so we can offer a cost-effective solution to senior housing, and so, but we feel we can do pretty much all of these.
And so I think we have them on the screen now. So controlled access to the building. So just, anyone cannot walk up. You've got key card access, property management on there, which most communities would have, community rooms where folks can gather, fitness facilities on site, business center. This next one's having the meal service on site. So there's something for them. Those can be brought in. Emergency pull cords in all the living spaces or something really geared towards this type of lifestyle. Local transportation services can be provided. Of course, interior elevators, having a salon on site is a real amenity for folks. It may not be open 5-7 days a week, but to have the ability maybe for staffers to come in on certain days, maybe even independent contractors. Conditioned corridors, interior trash chutes, community mail rooms. Those are just kind of some that we've got out there. Jim, you may have some others that you're planning on incorporating also.
No, that's a good list, and I think what's also worth noting is that the way that they're organized in the building will be it differentiates itself from just a typical multifamily building in the sense that by having the interior elevators, the interior corridors, and then mixing up the amenities inside the building, it allows for residents to move through the building and see each other on the way from the salon to down to the business center or the fitness facilities, and it's done in a way it's programmed in a way to provide a community for seniors, and that's a big part that is not listed here, but it's a big part of what we're trying to do, which is really get people to interact and form a community to have all the benefits, and there's a lot of health benefits to that. It's just people interacting with each other on a daily basis.
Okay. I see on the screen that is partially cut off, but it looks like you have agreed to increase the amenities to a minimum of 8.
That's correct.
Correct.
Okay. And then the list of amenities here is basically a menu at this point that you would choose from.
Correct.
And during the I believe we're continuing public hearing on the actual zoning application itself. When the public hearing is continued, or at least at the next planning board meeting, would you have that list of amenities narrowed down to what you really think you're going to be using?
Sure. I don't think that'd be a problem at all. We're actually probably dialing down a little bit finer. We've had some follow up with some of your council members to talk architecture, talk detailed site design. We think we'll have some nice rendering survey and get a real good feel for what it looks like. And certainly we could give you a list of commitments from these menu of amenities.
Okay. Are there any questions from the planning board?
I guess two. One is, could you remind us of the proximity of existing or planned public transportation, and maybe comment on the feasibility of having a lot of independent living facilities have a proprietary bus service that runs on infrequent schedules, regular schedules. So the feasibility of a proprietary bus service, and then the comment on the public transportation.
Yes. So, of course, this text amendment they're working on would not be just unique to our site. Our site, if you are familiar with that intersection to the north of Margaret Wallace at the Mentworth Common Shopping Center, there is CATS transportation. Jim, I don't know if y'all have looked at the viability of any additional transportation services just for your facility.
Hey, if I could interrupt for a second, this is just the text amendment, so we really need to keep the conversation about the text and not the larger project that'll come next month when it comes back to you all.
Yeah, and that's certainly an appropriate question when we continue the hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jay. Okay. Any other questions about the text amendment itself?
I have one question. What's the typical, and this could go to Rob or Jay, what's typical parking for apartments today? What was that?
I'm sorry, the typical parking for multifamily?
Correct.
It depends on the unit size, but roughly it's anywhere between 2 and 2.5 spaces for, your larger, for between a 2-bedroom and between a 3-bedroom and a 2-bedroom and a 3-bedroom multifamily. Yep.
Yeah. And just one of the things we presented at the hearing, the national averages, when you look at a typical multifamily community or typical apartment, would have 1.9 residents per unit. With these independent living facilities, you're down there. Brittany's got on the screen now, 1.1 residents per unit. So it's almost half. Rarely are you getting more than 1 resident per unit in the independent living facilities like this. So that's one of the reasons we're comfortable with that lower parking ratio. There's just not as many residents.
Would it be problematic to look at like a 1.3?
I think on this site, this is really what we need for this site. What this doesn't, now again, as Jay has reminded us, this is just a text amendment. If anyone comes through, if this text amendment is approved, you would still also have a conditional zoning. So you'd have a site plan, and then you can look at it on a case-by-case basis. Where's this site? What's appropriate? And you may deem as they come through, well, the ordinance requires 1.1, but in this location, we think you need more parking. And that's a conversation you could have on a case-by-case basis when the site comes through for a site-specific conditional plan. Jay, would you agree?
Yeah, agreed.
Would almost think though you could go 1.3 and then go conditional backwards to. Is that correct, Jay? I mean, you could tell me. I'm just looking at it the other way.
You could. I mean, I'll tell you, one of the comments you probably heard at the hearing was another council member said and talked with us on a follow up is, well, if this were in downtown Matthews, I might not want you to have that many. So then we said, well, do we need to lower it below? And I felt like that staff felt that 1.1 was a safe number and the conditional plan would give the ability to require more. So we're hearing it on both sides. Well, do you need more or do we need less?
Two things. Colin, if you can stop your screen share for a second, I can pull up our parking table really quickly just so you all can, it helps me to see the comparison. I think I may have done this at the council meeting too. So you can see here, Rob was mentioning earlier kind of those typical parking ratios. Most apartments are probably somewhere in that 700 to 1249 range. But again, a big difference in the typical number of residents. I will also point out this age and mobility limited senior housing is also at 1.1, so that doesn't match.
I think it's important that you pointed that out, Jay, that it does match the same generic type of housing that we're talking about for this amendment. Are there any other questions from the board?
I got one quick question. I know at the hearing they were talking about the height of the building. Does the RI district have a height limitation? I'm sure it does. And does this text amendment change that in any way?
It's a great question. It does have a height restriction. This does not change what the existing RI maximum height is. I'd have to look it up. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but this does not change what would be allowed in the RI district in terms of height.
Carrie, you have a question? You're always great about using the hand raise button.
Thank you. Actually, this is for Rob and staff. Assuming this isn't an exhaustive list of potential amenities that you would find in these processes, is it safe to assume that we would face additional text amendments in the future if we had a different petitioner approaching us about their set of 8 or 12? We would simply go back through this process in each occurrence to make additions once this is approved?
Yeah, so I think that would probably be the cleanest way to do it. Or we could say, look, this is the menu you have to choose from. If you want to go over and above it, have at it. But I think that could go either way. We could come back and add to it later, or just say, if you have, this is the list you're limited with, choose 8. And if you want to do more, that's great.
All right, I guess I'm thinking of as an instance where for some particular reason a petitioner doesn't have 8 of this particular list, but offers private shuttle service as part of what they want to be their 8th factor. We would simply review this process as we are now and consider a text amendment at that time, correct?
Yes, I think that would be the best process to carry out.
Thanks.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay. Do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Ms. Reeve?
I move that we recommend to approve zoning motion 2020-716 as most currently amended, as it's consistent with the Matthews land use plan because it allows increased diversity of housing options within the town of Matthews. It's reasonable because there is an existing definition of independent living facilities, but no corresponding listing in the permitted use table.
Okay. Thank you, Janet. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Jonathan Clayton. We'll do a verbal roll call, starting with Natasha Edwards.
I approve.
Carrie Lamson.
Approve.
Jana Reeve.
Approve.
Mike Rowan. Mike Rowan. Mike, you're still on mute. And I think you may be freezing up.
I think he's having an internet issue.
Yeah. I'll come back to Mike in just a second. Jonathan Clayton.
Approve.
Jim Johnson.
Approve.
And we're back to Mike Rowan.
Approve.
Okay, we're good. And I also would vote yes to approve, so that is passing unanimously. And we'll see the applicant back at the public hearing continuation early next month.
Thank you all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, zoning application 2020-718, Harley Davidson at 9205 Independence Boulevard. Change of conditions, including facade renovation and addition of an outdoor stage. Rob, back to you.
Hello. Thank you. Yeah, so this is the Harley Davidson dealership over there on 9205 East Independence Boulevard, Premier Holdings. And they are interested in change of conditions rezoning to add, to change the elevation, the facade of the main building, add a outside seating area, terrace area, and then also a outdoor sound stage located over a stormwater detention structure. And let's see, there was, during the public hearing, there was some concern raised over the sound stage for more and more events. In the original conditional zoning from 2003, the dealership is limited to 8 or 9 events. And so also additionally in that original rezoning, accessory uses clearly incidental to the permitted principal use or structure are allowed. And staff suggests that the planning board forward a favorable recommendation of zoning motion 2020-718, change of zoning conditions for 9205 East Independence Boulevard, Premier Holdings, to the Board of Commissioners.
Thank you, Rob. Is there any representation from the applicant with us?
Let's see. Yes, Oscar is here.
Okay. First question I have is related to the stage. I know there was some discussion about the location over a retention pond, and I'm not sure if we got any specific response, and I may be wrong, but any specific response from Public Works on any issues that might come up because of the location of that stage.
The Public Works Director did have some concerns over the maintenance of what could be the maintenance of the retention area with the stage over top of it. The stage is about 8 feet in height or so. Oscar, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a way to get underneath the stage for maintenance and cleaning. And I'm assuming that the design and construction would be certified by a registered engineer or architect.
Correct. And I also, if I can add up to that, I mean, on the last meeting, I mean, we addressed the issue that the height of the stage is designed so people can go under and do the maintenance. The stage, I mean, the pond is not accessible for any equipment. Really, to get into it to make the cleaning, you have to jump and go down 4 feet. So one of the main concerns before was, will they be able to put any equipment and machinery into the retention area? But since the conditions, existing conditions, would not allow to any equipment to go under, I think we resolved in the last meeting that the 8 feet will be enough and sufficient to do a proper maintenance of the space.
So basically, the stage being in its new location on top of the retention pond would not present any problems that aren't already present.
Correct. We have, if we can share on the screen, we have the presentation that shows a section and a rendering of the stage. And if Jay, you can put it on the screen so maybe everybody can see the conditions, because we are doing it elevated, so it really will not interfere with any existing conditions on the retention area.
Jay, can you bring that up?
Yeah, is that the same thing that was shared at the
yes,
public hearing? Okay, give me just a moment. I'll pull that right up.
Well, Jay, I have it on my screen. If you want, I can share my screen.
Please do.
We'll go from there. Okay, here we go. Okay, so I'm going to scroll back to the original, to the site plan. So this is the area where the stage is, and the stormwater retention is there as well. And then also I'll scroll down to the way the stage is going to be constructed.
Yeah, there's a section, so you see we're elevating the stage, so it really does not have any conflicts with the retention area. And if you go to the next one, you can see a little render, so how it's going to look. And we discussed, I mean, on the last meeting we had a public works representative, and he was okay with the solution.
The artist rendering looks like it makes it look like there's plenty of space under there, actually.
Yes, sir. It'll be 8 feet clear below the stage.
Not that it's critical, but how often do you have to clean out that area?
You know, they bought the dealership 2 years ago, and at this point they haven't had to make any maintenance, not even once.
Okay.
So
that's good to know. Okay. Do any of the planning board members have questions? Mr. Johnston?
Yeah, I didn't get by there. I would like to have driven by there, but are we actually building a new retention pond? It does look like if there is one, it's like underground right now. So this would expose it with the stage being over it. Is that how it's envisioned?
No, the retention is existing. The bottom of the retention is around 4 feet below the grade level, and it's got a retention wall. But we're not touching it. We're just building on top of it. We're just putting the pillars, so we bring the stage higher. But the existing retention pond is going to remain existing as it is today.
Mr. Lamson?
This is a question for Rob. Rob, the 2003 conditional zoning that was approved for this site, am I correct in understanding it does not have a sound stage on its plan whatsoever? This is one of the additions that they're asking for?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
All right. So does that mean that there's any concerns, or how did they address amplified sound? Since there isn't a station there today, and I assume this will have some factors, what are the conditions for amplification of the sound and restrictions, et cetera, that would be set up under this particular zoning?
Okay, so our it would be required to have a noise permit. So each event that they have, they get a noise permit from the police department, and any gatherings that, well, not nowadays, but any gatherings that are over, I think 200 people, they have to have off-duty police officers there. So I can't address exactly what the noise permit allows, because I'm not familiar with that, but that's the process.
If I can add to that, I mean they've been conducting events on the parking lot. Every time they do an event, they pull a permit on the city, because obviously they cannot do such kind of gatherings without a permit. And the idea is to keep pulling those permits as the events come. You know, it'd be the same process. The idea was just to get to consolidate the space and make it in a better presentable way. But they will still have to get apply for those permits every time an event occurs, as they do today. When they do a gathering or something, they apply for a permit at the city to do that event.
And I understand, Carl, having the gathering in terms of a number of individuals permitted on the site is different than having an amplified sound stage 8 feet above the current area, and depending on its direction. I just want to make sure that everyone has discussed there is amplification involved in this particular conditional approval if we put a stage in. I assume that perhaps you were doing these events under that covered patio against the building previously, or were you out in the parking lot?
It was against the building. It was on the same side of the parking lot, and in that area of the property, but it was against the building.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we at least raise the question about amplification and that the applicant understands and that there are conditions that will comply based on that activity. I know it's all commercial property, but we've had a number of discussions with other types of applications where sound traveled and there were concerns about, amplification at any time of day. The other thing is, are there time of days for each of these events, or are they a 24-hour activity? Will that be part of the permit as well when you apply?
Yes, I mean the events are we can issue, if you want, a list of the events that have been done, so we can maybe have a benchmark. But according to what the owner has transmitted to us, every time they do an event, they do like 1 or 2 events a month. They go to the city and they pull their permits to do those events. So it'll be on the same conditions.
All right. Well, I can see the list of what's proposed, but I can't see what time of day, for what hours, of what operation. It just wasn't there. Or there's a list of the proposed activities that are currently on their calendar. I was curious if there were a 2-hour event or an 8-hour event, just as an example.
Maybe I can add to it. My name is Andres. I am the lead designer at Fresh International. And I was the person behind the design of the facade as well as the stage. We've been participating in the design of Harley-Davidson dealership for 15 years, and we've done over 400 dealerships around the world. So we're very familiar with the events when we participated at many. Most of the events that they do during the week are what they call bike nights, and these bike nights are usually gatherings that happen in front of the dealership where they congregate to leave the dealership in a ride. They don't stay at the facility. So that's one of the main pools of traffic for the dealership. But this soundstage is dedicated to launching new products. Harley-Davidson, and the reason why these dealerships are redesigning and they're investing on these dealerships is because Harley-Davidson has 102 motorcycles that they plan to launch in the next 5 to 10 years. And even this coming year, they have 2 brand new lines of motorcycles that are being launched. So the effort for the dealers is to provide for a proper setting for the launch of these new motorcycles to happen. The launch might be an event that is during the day. Most of the events that they do are during the day, actually. It's very rare that you have an event at night, just because of the nature of the motorcyclist. They arrive early, they stay there for the day, there's some music, there's some food, maybe a barbecue, they go home.
Okay, thank you. I understand.
A question for Oscar. We do have the list of events, and it looks like this was locked down during the conditional zoning in 2003. It doesn't have specific dates, obviously, but it has specific months for these events. I assume that you're going to continue to only plan your events during these months.
Correct. That's correct.
Okay.
Try to keep it online with what's already approved.
You do have most months covered anyway, so.
That's correct.
Okay. Any other questions from the board?
Quick question. Have there been any noise complaints in the past from neighbors?
Not that we are aware.
Okay.
We don't have any complaints.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Oscar and Andres, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Since there are no other questions or comments, do I have a motion? Jay, did you just raise your hand?
Never mind. Sorry. I'm good. Thank you.
All right. Okay.
I'll make a motion.
Jonathan?
Yeah, I recommend for zoning application 2020-718, Recommend approval because it's recommended for approval and it has been found consistent with the Matthews land use plan. As follows: is consistent because the rezoning changes and conditions are consistent with the Matthews land use plan, as it supports the economic viability of the existing business and a retail center. And it's reasonable because necessary uses are permitted in the original conditional zoning criteria, as are special events.
We have a motion from Jonathan Clayton. Do I have a second? Mike Rowan?
I'll second.
Okay. I have a second from Mike Rowan. We'll do a roll call vote, starting with Natasha Edwards.
I approve.
Carrie Lamson.
Approve.
Jana Reeve.
Approve.
Mike Rowan.
Approve.
Jonathan Clayton.
I approve.
And Jim Johnson.
I approve.
Okay. Zoning application 2020-718 Harley Davidson passes unanimously. And go to the board. Okay. Next item is administrative amendment. Administrative amendment, Rice Road mixed use development. Jay, does this one go to you?
It does, and once again, my screen's gone to amber. That's my computer doesn't like these evening meetings. I tried turning some lights on in here, so I don't know why I look like this. Yeah, so this project, it's a little bit unique. I'm going to screen share. We have a site plan the applicant's going to share with you just in a moment, and I will. I'm going to share the property location with everybody. So again, this request is unique. This property was rezoned to the MUD category with no specific site plan, probably in 2013 or 14. There's currently a vacant former daycare on the site. As a component of the mixed use development CD plan, or really lack of CD plan, it requires future site plan approval and elevation approval by the town board. As staff began to review this project, we did identify these two administrative amendments as being items that need to be addressed prior to the board being able to make a decision. So the decision is currently planned for November 9th. Your board has the ability to either approve this request, or you can forward it on to the board for their approval or denial. So you've got a few options here. The two requests you have before you, and I'm going to switch my screen in just a moment. The first pertains to the MUD district. East Point Drive, as you see here, is really just a little stub street right behind actually the Harley Davidson site we just talked about. The MUD category calls for roads to be extended to the property line. And right now there is a 50-foot landscape buffer on this side of the road, or this side of the property, sorry. The second administrative amendment pertains to a buffer along Samuel Road that was put in when the entirety of this development was put in the 90s. And that buffer today, it's fairly overgrown, but we're looking south on Samuel. So the car right up here, that's Rice Road. So the site is just behind this buffer or small berm that's there. It's really hard to tell because of how large and overgrown the vegetation is now. The applicant does plan a mixed use, primarily office development that would have buildings fronting on Samuel Road. So the mixture of a berm and buildings really don't go together. Their intention is a slightly more urban style development without the berm. We're also going to talk about a public improvement variance independent of these administrative amendments in just a moment, but I just wanted to give you a quick overview. And I think Mr. Carmichael has a site plan as part of a presentation he's going to be giving you in just a moment. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have at this time from staff.
Any questions for Jay? Okay.
All right. Well, I'm not going anywhere. John, do you have the presentation ready to share, or do you need us to pull it up?
If you give me 1 second, I think I have it. Let's see here. I did send it to y'all, but I think I can just pull it up and share it.
It might be easier that way. You
Yeah.
can. We trust you to. We know you're not going to Zoom bomb us. So
No, I don't know what that is. So, I couldn't do it if I wanted to. Can y'all see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank y'all. Good evening, members of the planning board, Jay and Rob and Craig. I'm John Carmichael here on behalf of Alita Properties. With me tonight are, and I'm going to mispronounce Yuri's name, but Yuri Van Schieten of Alita Properties and Michael Beberg of Bowler Engineering. Jay told you where the site is. I've got some aerials if we need to refer back to them. This is Sam Newell, Rice Road, and this is East Point that will be required to be extended through the property to the property line under the MUD ordinance, as Jay mentioned. This is the approved rezoning plan. If we need to come back to it to discuss it in more detail, we certainly can. The part is rezoned, I believe, back in 2014 to MUD CD. And this is the site, parcel A, that we're discussing tonight. The rezoning plan required any developer of this site to come back to the town board of commissioners rather, for a site plan approval and also architectural approval. Yuri is not pursuing architectural approval at this point. He'll have to do that later, but he is pursuing the approval of a site plan that I'll share with you in a moment. And it's scheduled to go back to the town board, on November the 9th. We had I guess back to the board is the correct thing to say, because we gave the board a preview of the site plan last month. You may recall that. But this is the approved conditional rezoning plan. These are the notes. So this is the site plan that's been submitted to Jay's office and will be considered by the Board of Commissioners on November 9th. This is a little hard to see. It gets a little washed out, so we have a rendered version here. This is East Point Drive. This is Rice Road, and this is Sam Newell Road. What is proposed would be as Jay said, a mixed-use development comprised of 6 freestanding buildings that would contain a maximum of 102,700 square feet of gross floor area. The permitted uses would be general office uses, primarily medical, and then medical, dental, optical office uses, clinics, labs, and financial institutions. The plan would limit the amount of medical uses, however, to 50,100 square feet. So a total of 102,700 square feet of floor area, of which a maximum of 50,100 square feet could be devoted to a medical type office use. And it is a more urban development. As you can see, the buildings are pulled up to the road. There'd be nice architecture, nice streetscape. So the combination of a berm and an urban design, at least in our mind, doesn't really go together. I will tell you, in my 20 years of doing this, there's one occasion where we had to do a berm on an urban development. And in my opinion, it didn't work out well, because what you end up seeing is a berm and then just the top of the buildings. So we think the berm would defeat the purpose of having a nice urban environment here. But as Jay mentioned, there are 2 administrative amendment requests. The first deals with this buffer along Clare Drive. You can see here on the plan east, if you see my cursor. And so, as Jay mentioned, the developer is required to extend East Point Drive to the property line where my cursor is, almost to Clare Drive. It can't be extended to Clare Drive because there is, believe it or not, a little spite strip here. So it cannot, at least at this point, be extended all the way to Clare Drive, but it would be required to be extended to the property line. But that brings that ordinance requirement into conflict with the approved plan and the buffer, because we're asking for an administrative amendment to allow the street to go through the buffer. The remainder of the buffer wouldn't be disturbed. It would continue to be required to be established, but the administrative amendment request, if approved, would allow the extension of East Point Drive. So this is a lot of words to basically say what I just said, is that we'd like an administrative amendment to allow the the relevant portion of the 50-foot landscape buffer to be modified or eliminated, whatever the correct adjective is, or verb, rather, to allow the extension of East Point Drive to the property line. The second administrative amendment request is to eliminate the requirement of a combination of a berm and landscaping with a height of 10 feet along the site's frontage on Sam Newell Road. As I mentioned before, the proposed development is an urban development with buildings pulled up to Sam Newell Road and fronting Sam Road. And the combination of a berm and landscaping is more of a suburban development requirement. And having the proposed buildings address Sam Newell Road as proposed eliminates, at least in our view, the need for the berm and landscaping. Now, that would not alleviate the applicant's requirement to submit a landscaping plan to Jay and Rob for approval, which they would have to do during the normal course of the permitting process. But those are the two administrative amendment requests. Yuri and Michael are logged on as well, and Michael's the engineer working on the plan, and then Yuri would be the property owner and the developer, and they're available to answer any questions relating to the administrative amendment request. And Jay, I guess as set forth on the agenda, we're kind of bifurcating these. The administrative amendment, we'll talk about that first, and then the public improvement variance request second. Is that how you want to handle that?
That's correct.
Okay. So we're happy to answer any questions. We appreciate the board's consideration of these requests.
Thank you, John. Are there any questions from the board?
We have a question from Carrie.
Jay, it's actually for you.
Okay.
Why is there a requirement to extend East Point Drive to a buffer area that does not connect with another street?
Yeah, so the intention of the MUD district is for it to really be a part of an interconnected neighborhood. So we require the streets to be stubbed out to the property line. Our intention in speaking with our transportation planner, there's about a 8 or 10 foot wide spite strip along right at Clare Drive. Not entirely sure how that occurred, but our vision would be that the town would come in and finish that tiny segment of road and create some better connectivity to the adjoining neighborhood. That's really and something we would obviously speak with the neighborhood about in the future to make sure that is their desire. But it's a fairly landlocked neighborhood, and when the US 74 conversion occurs, it's going to be even more difficult to access the neighborhood as that becomes a toll road along the frontage.
All right, so it's still the town's expectation that there's an opportunity to connect to Clare Road and ultimately over to Sam Newell by extending East Point now for this project, even though, we're moving buffer and so on. It's not to get access to the parking lots where, for the other commercial buildings that would be to the west of East Point Drive at this time.
When you say parking lots is part of this development?
You're looking at this development and it's behind the Harley Davidson building. There isn't any real connectivity that would allow you to get through there, practically speaking, even though you may extend it up to the border that's connected. I'm not sure I could see the usefulness of the road until such time as it would be connected. That was the only reason for my question.
Yeah, you're right. It does. We did want to see more than one access point to the site. That was raised in our development review of it. So, with the second driveway there, the road does make practical sense up to that point.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
I will add, this does both of these do come with a favorable recommendation from staff. The only caveat being, the berm was put in place at a different time. It was, over 30 years ago, or about 30 years ago now. The area has changed substantially. However, there is still one residential property across the street. So this will be a substantial change. We've got a church at the corner. I think there's one. John, if you go back, can you go back to the Polaris? Yeah, so that's a good one. So if you see the 3 large parcels, well, really the 4 large parcels near it, there's I think 2 are a church. And then there's one house maybe left that's residential, and at the corner there's another church under construction. So there is going to be an impact in terms of the view from the front of the house. That's no longer going to be a green buffer in that location.
And Mr. Lamson, one thing that is a part of the site plan that the Town Board of Commissioners will consider on the 9th, there's a note, and I'm going to paraphrase it, that provides that at the time that East Point Drive is extended, if the applicant would actually go ahead and extend it to Clare Drive, if the town has at that point acquired that spike strip, and provided that we enter into a reimbursement agreement with the town, because it'd be a lot cheaper for the developer to do it when he's out there mobilized at that point than, 5 years thereafter. I assume it would be cheaper. I would have to believe that. But anyway, the developer would do that if the town has acquired that spike strip at the time of development, and the town would reimburse the incremental cost for that additional extension.
Thank you, Mr. Carmichael. I guess I'm thinking a little bit on the opposite side of it, is that why lose that buffer until such time as that is going to happen? That was sort of the gist of why my question. Obviously, I know when you're developing this property, you need to go ahead and do what's required, but it just seems to be a shame that we're going to punch a 50-foot hole on that end of the street that may not, for quite a while, get any functional use out of it. I just wanted to make sure I understood who was driving, if you will. If these are our requirements, that's the MUD district requirement. And I don't think it would be appropriate or fair to ask you as developers to put it in partway and then come back later once that is a potential and clear the rest of that area and make it functional. If I agree with you, if we can do it simultaneously, great. But that requires the town to acquire property, as I now understand. Right. Thank you.
And this is obvious, but the developer would be happy not to extend it. to be honest with you.
I didn't think you were going to argue with my question.
I was not arguing with your question.
Okay. There are other questions from the board.
Jay, you may have already addressed this, but why is there a requirement of the buffer? I'm sorry, of the berm. Is that because there was some residential nearby, or are there any other reasons that was a requirement?
Yeah, so my recollection going back and looked at these old site plans from the early 90s when this segment of 74 was developing, this was still farmland. It was undeveloped, and there was a desire to create a very hard line between commercial facing development on 74 and then things being more residential from Sam Newell back, I guess that would be back eastward. So it was really the buffer that you see behind the movie theater. It kind of blocks the view of the parking lots and buildings and really creates that separation. But development in the 90s was different. It wasn't street facing as this developer is proposing. There would be a street tree requirement, and I'm assuming the developer, it's not a requirement in our code, but they would be doing probably foundation plantings and other plantings. But it will be a stark change. Once that buffer comes down, you're going to have views straight towards 74 and some of the back of the development there. So.
And I have one more question. I guess I should know, but what's a spike strip?
Oh, sorry, that is lingo. It's really a land that prohibits like street connections, and it's that. Well, I can't point, but there's a strip that runs between this parcel and Clare Drive, and spike strips kind of originally were put in place just to keep anything from ever connecting. That's all. Yeah, there. Thanks, John. So we're letting John drive tonight, but
I thought it was like that thing when you get a rental car that you can't go backwards, or you'll blow all your tires out.
Well, no spike. Yeah, if we're going to do spike strips, that's we'll have to refer that question to our transportation planner and how to reduce traffic in Matthews.
Help the tire industry.
Yeah, right. There's Pep Boys is right there. But I did want to emphasize, we have recommended this, but just it will be a very, very different appearance particularly during construction, before the buildings are complete, before the sod and landscaping goes in. But I think ultimately the finished product that the applicant is planning here will be quite attractive on this segment of Samuel Road.
I was about to ask a question about trees, but that's not for this meeting. So, any other questions from the board? Okay. My understanding is we have two options on these two administrative requests, and they would be managed together. The two options are approve it as a board or pass it along to the Board of Commissioners for their review and approval.
With a recommendation, if you want.
Right, with a
yeah.
Okay. So, any discussion about which direction the board wants to take here? Okay. Well, since no one said anything yet, I'll go ahead and throw my 2 cents in. It looks like this is a very clear-cut win for both the town and the developer. It really doesn't make sense to me to have them clear cut a section that may not be used for several years. It would just be probably needless expense on their part. That's on the extension of East Point Drive up at the upper end. The other piece is to eliminate the berm on Sam Newell, which, and it sounds like Jay's point is zoning was different 20, 30 years ago. And there was a reason for that berm being there at the time, but that reason really no longer exists. And therefore, it probably would be, it certainly would be advantageous for the developer. I think it'd be advantageous for the town of Matthews to eliminate it and have a nice new development fully open on Sam Newell Road side. So, based on my comments, my personal recommendation would be to vote to approve these two administrative amendments together and just inform the board that they've been approved. So, comments?
John, can you stop screen share for deliberation so they can everyone can see each other? Thank you.
Thank you. I got a quick question. I'm not sure I understood the what you were saying there. The amendment was to allow them to cut into the 50-foot buffer and to complete the road all the way to Clare Drive. Wasn't that what we were?
No, it was actually the opposite. They, under normal circumstances, would be required to cut in to extend that road and cut out that buffer. Now their request is to not do that or not be forced to do that. And the berm typically would be left on Sam Newell Road. Their request is on the administrative amendment to eliminate that berm.
I'm going to go with Jimmy. I understood the removal of the berm on Samuel Road. I think I'm still slightly confused on the cutting in of the road to attach to Clare.
Yes, that's correct. Can I clarify, please?
Yes, please.
So my name is Yuri, and I'm a developer here. So I guess there is a confusion here. We are asking to extend through the property line, which would require to cut through the trees.
The 50 foot.
And the reason we made that request is based on town's recommendation. It wasn't, something that we were interested to pursue, but based on Jason town recommendation, we wanted to, make that amendment. But it seems like it does make sense, to wait until that strip is acquired before we actually cut through the buffer zone. And John and Michael, feel free to step in here.
I guess where we originally started was with, I get what I think Mike and Jim, you guys were saying, was to leave it out, which is what the render shows. It showed originally that stretch of road not being built. But I think that Jay and Susan's recommendation was that, that stretch of road should per the MUD ordinance. And so I think it was kind of an either or scenario where it was either this administrative amendment to allow the road to be constructed in order to comply with the public improvement ordinance, or it would have to have been, and Jay or John, jump in if I'm wrong, it would have had to have been a public improvement variance to remove the requirement to build that stretch of the road.
That's correct.
That's correct. It's an ordinance requirement as we sit here tonight. And so the purpose of the administrative amendment was simply to allow us to comply with the town's requirements.
So the goal in reality, and it sounds like I was completely wrong on that part of it, is to go ahead and eliminate that buffer now.
Just Mr. Foster, for the width that's needed for the road, and I guess to
get it to the property line.
Yes, sir. It wouldn't eliminate the entire buffer, just where the road would go through. That's correct.
Right. Okay. Mr. Lamson.
And I have one other question just for clarification on the Sam Newell side. If I understand correctly, we're not only the administrative amendment is a request to be able to remove that berm, but not to install curb, gutter, and sidewalk. So if that's the case, can you take a moment, and there is a sidewalk there, but not to enhance or to change that until such time as NCDOT decides to do the road improvement project. Is that correct?
Isn't
yes, sir, that would be part two. Yes, sir, Mr. Lamson, that's part two. Right. That would be the public improvement variance request that we'll discuss.
All right. The reason for my question is, can you explain for me for a moment how you'll handle that swale, or what that will be like after you clear or cut the berm portion of that as you enter and have an entrance in and out of the property as you would develop it, assuming that the road project will not happen anytime soon?
Michael, can you take that?
Sure. Yeah, sure, Mr. Lynn. Yes. So let's go down the, if the DOT project were to not occur in the near term, currently there today, we would be, required to replace that ditch with something that functioned, and was accepted by DOT for all their different standards, and, put a sidewalk, behind that ditch perhaps. Would be one scenario out of several that could occur. I mean, regardless, DOT would have a hand in reviewing the drainage along that road to make sure that as part of cutting down the berm, we have not impacted the drainage function of the highway.
Thank you. That's all I wanted to ensure, was that there was some mechanism in this process for review and approval, since we would be taking that section out, but not necessarily completing the road if that were to occur. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. Any other questions? Good discussion. Do I have a motion? Are we clear on exactly what we're voting on? I think I finally am now, and I apologize for that.
I think I only have one issue is whether the clear, and I understand the issue because we have an ordinance that says you got to build the road. The second is we also have an ordinance for the buffer at the same time. I think part of me says it would make sense to leave that buffer there until due time that the road was actually constructed. But part of me, I think that goes back to the town or back to the Board of Commissioners, just in the fact that, due to, the requirements of zoning that you would build that street. But the question is what to do with that berm that's existing. So I almost lean toward, I approve it, but goes back before the town board or approval recommendation. I assume, Craig, that's correct.
Correct.
You can do it
you
that
just
way.
Want to recommend and let town council make the final decision.
Yes.
Okay.
Is it possible to separate those two requests, administrative amendments, and vote on one and then with the other one for the board?
That's possible. It's two individual requests. Craig's nodding yes.
So we could do that at this time instead of waiting to tweak.
You can approve one and send another one on if you want.
Okay.
I got a quick comment. The long-term benefit to connecting to Clare Drive is probably there. And so the buffer's got to go eventually, I think. And I think the ordinance makes sense to connect. So at the end of the day, why would we not just recommend removal of the buffer to allow the road to connect and then we're done? I mean, at least that's sort of out of the way. And, then the next steps are many and further on down the timeline. But it seems to me we should just allow them to at least remove the buffer for the road when and if and whenever any of this happens.
So at that point, the developer is done with their requirements. Along with extending the road up to that point as far as they can.
It makes sense to connect. So let's remove the obstacle to connect.
Okay. Now do I have a motion? And then it can be to approve both pieces of the administrative amendment. Could be to approve one, send the other one to the board. It's totally up to us to make that decision.
Your power.
I'll make the motion. I think we should approve both administrative amendments. The one amendment that removes the 50-foot buffer so that the extension can occur to the property line, and also to remove the berm and allow them to work with DOT to figure out how to make the drainage work without the berm, but that we should allow both administrative amendments.
Okay.
Second.
All right. We have a motion from Jim Johnson, a second from Jana Reeve, and we'll go through roll call, starting with Natasha Edwards.
Yes, I approve.
Okay. Carrie Lamson.
I approve.
Jana Reeve.
Approve.
Mike Rowan.
Approve.
Jonathan Clayton.
Approve.
Jim Johnson.
Approve.
Okay. The administrative amendments both pass unanimously, and that serves as final approval on these and will not have to go to the board for final approval. Okay. Now we're to the public improvement variance on Rice Road mixed-use development.
So this is not very exciting now. We've kind of already we already dived into it a little bit. I'm going to reshare the screen, and I've moved the street view up just a little bit, and I know there's a lag sometimes, so I'll pause. So we're now. Everybody see the white SUV parked there sometime a year or two ago?
Yes.
So, this is facing north on Sam Newell. That's Rice Road on the right. DOT is part of the U2509 74 widening and toll road project. Had planned to punch through Rice Road, so the cul-de-sac that you saw adjacent to this development, turning this into a four-way intersection with a traffic signal. Recently, we've learned that DOT only has a fraction of the money they need to complete this project, maybe only a third or 40%, depending upon your estimate. So they, CRTPO and Matthews and Charlotte are now looking at options for moving forward with what's most likely going to be a considerably pared back project. So having said that, as part of this public improvement variance, staff has evaluated it. The applicants requested to delete the curb gutter and sidewalk requirement that is typical in the UDO, and the request probably, it would have been favorably received 6 months ago, maybe, when we really thought DOT was moving forward, maybe a year ago. But when we felt that construction was imminent, it really wouldn't have made sense for the developer to go in at their cost and potentially put curb in the wrong place. Now, in speaking with our town engineer and transportation planner, there's a significant chance that this project could be 10 years, 20 years away, or never, with the cash crunch that NCDOT is facing. So, with planning and planning ahead for projects, you deal with the best information available at the present, and the best information that we have in summary is that NCDOT is likely not building this improvement in the foreseeable future. Now, with public improvement variances, these are just recommendations. Town board makes the ultimate call on it. So you're being asked to kind of weigh in and give feedback and a recommendation for approval or denial as part of the request. And I think, John, I think John has a plan view, or maybe Michael has one that shows that improvement the DOT was planning. And again, that could change in 3 months. DOT could come back and say, yes, we can build it. But again, we just don't know what the future. And there's hundreds of millions of dollars missing from a project budget. So I can't deliver that in any happier manner. It is what it is. So that's it for the staff report. And I know Mr. Carmichael has you may have a short presentation and maybe a site plan.
It's very brief. I do have the NCDOT project here, the map that Jay, we got that from the link you provided us.
Yes.
And this is Sam Newell. This is Rice Road here. And then this is the traffic signal that Jay was referring to. And then this is East Point, if you can see my cursor. And then this is the site here. And of course, that's Claire Drive there. But we filed the request for the variances, and they really pretty simply are to eliminate any requirement to construct curb, gutter, and sidewalk along the site's frontage on Sam Newell Road, to eliminate any requirement to construct a new sidewalk and planting strip along the site's frontage on Rice Road. And then the third one was to eliminate any requirement to extend Rice Road to Sam Newell Road. And I have this parenthetical here that says, if required. And talking with Jay today, I don't believe that that's required. So for that reason, we wouldn't need public improvement variance. Is that right, Jay?
That is correct.
Okay, so
that road improvements, the road is extended there as far as it can go. So it's a little bit different than East Point, right? So we don't see that as a necessary request.
Okay, so really it's just the two requests to eliminate curb, gutter, and sidewalk on Sam Newell along the site, and curb, gutter, and sidewalk on Rice Road along the site. And as I said in my letter, the primary reason was the NCDOT project is going to come in, and Michael, you can speak to this. If and when it's built, it would impact the improvements that the developer would build. Is that, if it's built, is that a fair statement?
I think that was the genesis of it is really if we're going to put curb and gutter out on, and I'll just start with Sam Newell, it would be, especially with Rice Road not connecting to Sam Newell, the curb and gutter along Sam Newell will just be all along the existing edge of pavement, because there would be no requirement to widen Sam Newell to the extent that the DOT project is going to widen it to, with these other lanes and et cetera. So, then when DOT came in to do their project, there would just be more additional expense for DOT to come in and rip out that curb and gutter and sidewalk and, put in new curb and gutter at the new curb line location, which I think they're going to widen the road anywhere between 10 and 20 feet towards the site, which we've accounted for in our site design, just to make clear to everyone and at least preliminarily, as best we can. Preliminary plans. So yeah, the thought was to try to just defer that to not add more cost to the project. But happy to take any other questions.
So maybe this is a question for Jay. Your presentation just a moment ago made it sound like NCDOT is not going to be involved in this for the foreseeable future. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, the answer is we just don't know. We expect a modified project. So let me go back. The 74 widening includes additional travel lanes, includes toll lanes, the grade separation, so taking the intersections on 74 and converting those to bridges. But there are also these other aspects of it, which were, completing the parallel collector roads in Matthews, Northeast Parkway and Independence Point. These are projects that were first conceived in the 80s. So it's been going on for a while. So you had all these piecemeal complementary projects going on, and we don't know yet what that's going to look like. Does this make it through as part of something that still gets built? It's possible. This segment this will be Northeast Parkway. So the DOT's plan is to create, I know you can't see it on this map, but where Northeast Parkway tees into Sam Newell today, the plan is for, Northeast Parkway to actually complete a swoop, and this portion of Sam Newell becomes Northeast. That's why it's 4-laned here. So it kind of, it's being bisected in this location. But Michael does bring up a good point. I will concede, where does that curb line fall? How much additional asphalt would need to be poured? Would you have just a stripe out area like we see around town, Michael, where you have a segment that's wide and it stops?
Well, I guess in this case, there wouldn't be a public improvement requirement to widen the road. It would only, unless the TIA dictated it.
Okay.
The only public improvement, I could be wrong, but I believe would just be to install the curb and gutter and sidewalk along the current road bed. And one thing we had talked about and had looked at was, could you try to, we're planning for this project, like I said, from a grading standpoint, from a layout standpoint, from a right-of-way standpoint. Could we try to plan and build, just the sidewalk, but not the curb and gutter, so that it didn't add cost to the DOT project, but still accomplish some more of the urban feel that we were trying to accomplish with the project. That was another consideration.
So there's really a whole lot of we just don't know here, isn't there?
Absolutely.
So if the developer puts in curb and gutter, puts in the sidewalk, 2 years, probably not 2 years, but let's say 5 years, 10 years, maybe never, the DOT comes through and tears up everything and does their own thing. We just don't know. To me, it doesn't make a lot of sense for the developer to spend what could be a considerable amount of money only to have it torn up in fairly short order. But at the same time, if the DOT never does this project, we're missing a piece of the development.
Could I ask another question, Jay? And just to confirm, if it's deemed that Rice Road does not have to be extended to Sam Newell per the ordinance, there is currently sidewalk on Rice Road around the cul-de-sac. And so I guess I'm wondering if we actually need the second item in that list either, because there is around as it stands today, there is a cul-de-sac around, there's a sidewalk around that cul-de-sac. It's hard to see from this, admittingly, but it is there.
I thought the second item was for the sidewalk on Sam Newell. Was it for Rice Road? Maybe I misread John's earlier presentation.
Yeah, it does say Sam Newell.
There's one for each.
We'll let you customize your plans. You and Grandma can be in our 5-gig plan with shareable data.
Yeah,
but
so
wait, there's more. Sorry.
The first one was curb gutter and sidewalk on Sam Newell. The second request was curb gutter and sidewalk on Rice Road. No, sidewalk and planing strip on Rice Road. Because there's already curb there, right, Michael?
Yes, sir. Yeah, and there's already a sidewalk there too. And I was thinking that if we had to extend Rice Road to the property line, then you would also have to waive the sidewalk. But if we're not having to extend it to Sam Newell, then there is already sidewalk around the cul-de-sac that's there today. We would just have to have the planting strip and the trees, which is, I think, fine.
So I think what Mr. Foster was mentioning was the potential to break up number one that maybe a sidewalk goes in, but not curb and gutter. Is that what you mentioned, Mr. Chair?
I think that's a logical solution for now. As long as the sidewalk could be placed in a location that we would know, even if DOT comes through with their project, would still be enough out of the way that it wouldn't be an issue, would not have to be torn up.
Yeah, I may be way out of line. I'm, this planning board first year, but isn't there a fee in lieu? Can't you do something like that? And then they just give some money and then no one builds it, and then the town can build it if and when we feel like it.
Yeah, that's a good question, Jim. We have a fee in lieu downtown as part of our streetscape plan. We don't have a formal fee in lieu program for sites outside of downtown. And even then, it's tough to estimate future construction cost. The way things rise so quickly. It's not to say the board couldn't entertain that concept. It's just not formally part of our development code.
So even if the board would try to work, either board would try to work out something with the developer to commit to building the curb and gutter at a certain point in the future, if DOT did not complete this project, I still see that could be pretty complicated due to how many years would it be before we would say, okay, it's not happening. And if we waited several years, maybe at that point it would happen. There's just so many unknowns here. That's why I think possibly the sidewalk without the curb and gutter would be a good compromise for now. Because it wouldn't necessarily be fair to go back to the developer several years from now and say, well, now we need your money. Other comments?
This is Kerry. Could I ask a quick question?
Sure.
I think I support the idea that we don't require new sidewalk and planting strips around Rice Road at this time. I don't think that's a variance that's necessary, given that we're not going to extend that road. I would be curious, and I apologize, I've not walked or been over to that area. Where is sidewalk today? Where does curb gutter and sidewalk exist on Sam Newell Road from before Rice Road down to Independence, Jake? Is there anyone that can tell me or show me a picture of what is currently there today so I can see what would be impacted if they do the frontage and berm removal that they plan?
So there's really nothing in the vicinity. You have some incremental as you move, Sam Newell, I don't know how long the road is here, around 2 miles-ish to Margaret Wallace. You do have, segments of curb and gutter that have been constructed as new developments have gone in over the years. But it is piecemeal.
What about sidewalk?
Also piecemeal sidewalk. We do have a pretty long multi-use or side path that we're planning to construct closer to Crown Point, kind of coming this direction. So it will be a very nice piece of pedestrian network going towards the Futures Creek Greenway that's going to be hopefully under construction in the next year or two.
That begs an interesting point. I would much rather see the developer help us add that multi-use path along this property than I would worry about sidewalk that doesn't connect to anything else at the current time. Similarly with curb and gutter, that at this point in time would have some impact of it tying into properties that don't currently have it. I would say perhaps there's a trade-off here. Rather than simply building a new sidewalk, could we do something that might have a multi-use purpose down the road that would be reusable regardless of the widening of the road and the replacement of sidewalk? Just asking.
Yeah, so I was just looking, and I'd be happy to share a map, but the Sam Newell multi-use or side path, it will go from Williams Road to Crown Point. So it doesn't quite come all the way up to this site, but it's, I don't know how far Williams Road is from here. Half mile, maybe.
Yeah.
Kerry, I kind of go with your concept. I mean, I would think that if you're looking for an urban feel, which is what you're doing for the site plan, the sidewalk along Sam Newell would make sense. It doesn't make any sense to do curb and gutter at this time to me, because the rest of the road's not like that. But even extending it, stub it to the existing sidewalk that's in that circle, just from a connectivity standpoint.
If I may add something, just for clarification, that from Susan from Public Works, the width of the sidewalk along Newell was 10 feet wide. I think that was in your email to us today. And so, I mean, it would kind of already be in that category of a multi-purpose, asphalt trail more than a sidewalk. So I think, while it may not get all the way down to the one that the town has planned, that you were saying, it is, I think, in that same vein if the rest of it were to develop and then connect.
Jay, can I ask you, that corner piece that's up, that's the town property, right?
Yeah, it was the developer deeded that to the town for a future fire station.
Okay, I thought so.
I think that was the zoning note I recall.
Let me try to.
No,
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Zoom meetings, but so the 10-foot sidewalk is kind of what I was envisioning. I think that's great that's what they're thinking. What about the and I know this is getting into your site plan, but wouldn't you have at least one pedestrian access from Sam Newell if you had such a big sidewalk into your project? It seems like it would be a good opportunity, at least, to invite the walking public in there. And I had one other comment about the Rice Road, and maybe I'm off, but it seems to me it would be in your best interest to complete that intersection. It seems like it would give you better access into your project, but again, that's certainly your call.
There's a big topography issue there, isn't there, Michael?
Yes, sir. That's the main reason I think wasn't done before also was just you're probably talking about 10 feet of difference between Sam Newell and Rice Road at the end of that cul-de-sac. Yeah. There and for clarification, I don't think it's shown on the concept plan to have where there will be a point of connection between Sam Newell's sidewalk system and the sites. It's just a matter of where that we would want to work through with Jay and during the site, the construction document permit process where the best point would be for grade and, site access. So yeah, I think we agree with you on that too.
Yeah, it's one of my pet peeves where there's no way to walk into a big project.
Okay. Let me see if I can recap real quickly based on the discussion that we've had on the three different pieces of the public improvement variance. Number one, public improvement variance to eliminate requirement to construct curb, gutter, and sidewalk. I think what we're leaning in, at least what I'm hearing, is construct a sidewalk, don't worry about the curb and gutters, particularly since it's going to be 10 feet wide. That's a good pedestrian walkway. Number two, public improvement variance to eliminate requirement to construct new sidewalk and planting strip along the site's frontage on Rice Road. If Rice Road is not punched through to become an intersection, the only thing that would be required is the planting strip because everything else is there. And on the third part, public improvement variance to eliminate any requirement to extend Rice Road to Sam Newell Road. My understanding is if DOT project goes through at any point, they're going to be managing that piece of the process also.
If I could make a minor point of clarification on
Sure.
Rice Road, I think part of it would be that the current standards in the in code would say a wider planting strip and then more space between the curb and the sidewalk than is there today. And then on parts of the existing cul-de-sac, the sidewalk is right up against the curb. So I think we could easily put those intended trees behind the sidewalk. And I guess if there was some procedural vote that still needed to occur to allow that, I just want to make sure it still took place, I guess. I'm just not sure if that's required or not, but I just wanted to point that out.
So you're referencing, Michael, the fact that it's a more narrow. We typically would require like an 8-foot planting strip and a 5-foot sidewalk, and that might be a 4 and a 4 that's in.
Right, and basically we could still plant the trees just behind the sidewalk in an easement and give them enough space, that 8 foot, and the sidewalk just may not be exactly the normal width, but given that it's still potential that DOT comes through and hopefully punches this road through and rebuilds the whole thing, that that's why we're trying to just leave that slight unconformity there, while still meeting the intent.
It's getting complicated. So on number 1, curb and gutter along with sidewalk, the two options would be I guess there's 3 options really: to tell the developer that they would still need to do this curb and gutter and sidewalk, with the possibility of it all being for nothing somewhere down the road if the DOT goes through with this project. Option 2 would be construct a 10-foot wide pedestrian path along the site and not worry about the curb and gutter. Or there's basically the 2 options, I guess, on that one. On the second piece, the cul-de-sac on Rice Road, make sure that the planting strip and the sidewalk conform to current town requirements, which would require some changes. And on the third one, public improvement variance to eliminate the requirement to extend for the developer to extend Rice Road to Sam Newell Road, whether we would want that to still happen. And it sounds like from the topography difference, that could be quite a project in itself, or to eliminate that need. So any comments on those?
The only thing I would add, Mr. Foster, is that based on what Jay said earlier and what we were discussing, is number 3, the need for number 3 has gone away because it's not a requirement to actually extend Rice Road to Sam Newell Road.
Okay.
So it's really just 1 and 2, I think, that we're considering. I mean, that we've asked you to consider, rather.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kerry?
I think what I'm wrestling with is the word any in both of those first 2. In other words, they're asking that they're to eliminate any requirement. And today, I don't know that I could see if that's a reasonable expectation. For example, if Rice Road sidewalk was cracked and broken, even though it's small and the planting area is dying and it's 4 feet wide, I'd still like them to make the necessary improvements to have an acceptable solution there, regardless of whether we construct it brand new or not. So any requirement for me says they're off the hook for anything, period. If we approve these or recommend approval for these elements, there's no going back to them down the road, for example, as they start this process and say, oops, hey, sorry, we forgot. There is a couple of things we'd like you to do. So I'm just wrestling with the fact that it can't be more specific as a variance than we don't want any requirement whatsoever in either of these 2 areas.
Yeah, and I agree. I think these would have to be clarified because we're kind of, I don't know if you'd call it cherry picking or not, but we want to look at parts of them and not look at other parts of them. And that's the complicated piece, because on the first one, is to your point, Kerry, to eliminate any requirement to construct curb, gutter, and sidewalk. It sounds like the prevailing theme is that we would want the sidewalk still, but we don't have that much of a concern due to the possible DOT project to require the curb and gutter at this time. And I think it'd be difficult to require it at some point in the future because there are just so many unknowns on cost, on time frame, and a lot of different things. And on the second one, the Rice Road planning strip and sidewalk, it would need to be immediately brought up to current requirements. And then the third one, as Mr. Carmichael's mentioned, third one's not in play at this point. Jim?
One quick clarification for me, at least. Wherever this 10 or even bigger, sidewalk would go, it would go where we predict, hopefully, the NCDOT project would leave it alone in the future. So it would still be there. It wouldn't have to be torn up. Is that not correct?
That would be the goal. And Michael, do you have enough information at this point based on the NCDOT drawings of their project that you would be pretty comfortable knowing where to put that path?
Short version, yes. Been working with their plans before. We'd need to keep working on it, but I think they've got a good bit of information in there today.
Okay. Any other comments? Any other questions? And Craig, on this one, this would be strictly a recommendation to the board.
Correct.
This is not something we would vote on ourselves. And
No.
Okay.
Pass the buck.
Just chop this whole thing up and then pass it on. Carrie.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Just one more quick question, and maybe this is Craig. If we were to change the wording of what they've requested, would they have to agree to that before we would vote and make a recommendation? For example, I'm sorry, Craig, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say yes and no. You can recommend denial and approval or specify. You can do either way.
Well, the line of thinking I've got is if we were modifying number one to eliminate the need for, as Mike, you've been saying, curb and gutter, but not for sidewalk, does the applicant have to agree to that before we would vote on that wording if that were the recommended motion?
You can recommend denial of the curb, gutter, and sidewalk with the approval of the sidewalk. You can.
And so we need to craft an updated public improvement variance.
Well, can I offer a suggestion?
Yes.
And not to put words in anyone's mouth, but you could, if you were so inclined, you could approve a variance to eliminate curb and gutter along the site's frontage along Sam Newell Road on the condition that the applicant construct a, whatever, I think Michael said, a 10-foot wide sidewalk along the site's frontage on Sam Newell Road. I mean, you could, in a location that as contemplated under the DOT project, something like that. I mean, you could grant a variance to eliminate curb and gutter on the condition that they build a sidewalk, a 10-foot wide sidewalk. I'm probably stepping on Craig's toes. I'm sorry.
No, it's same way.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yuri, you have any questions about that?
No, I don't have questions.
Okay. Back to Craig. Anything that we would vote on would have to be based on a new set, basically, of the public improvement variance, the 1, 2, and 3, and or elimination of parts or all of at least one of them, correct? We just need to restate the public improvement variance, get it in the record, and then vote on it.
That's right.
Okay. So anybody willing to take a stab at putting this together? I see Natasha going, nah, I don't think so.
Is it a problem for John Carmichael to come up with a new wording and send it along?
Well, let me try to do it. But I think it's going to be, to a large extent, what John would want to do anyway. So let me take a stab at it. Number one, A public improvement variant is to eliminate any requirement to construct curb and gutter while constructing a minimum of a 10-foot sidewalk on the site's frontage along Sam Newell Road. The sidewalk will be placed in coordination with NCDOT to ensure that it doesn't have to be moved if the NCDOT does the Sam Newell connection project. Does that work for one?
Perfect.
Okay. Number 2, public improvement variance to bring the current sidewalk and planting strip along the site's frontage on Rice Road up to current town standards. Jay, does that need to be more specific, or is that good enough? You okay with that?
Yeah, I think that's pretty clear as long as the board understands the intent of the recommendation.
Sure. Okay. And to eliminate number 3. Okay. Everybody understand? Have any comments? Any recommended changes to that? Okay. Does anyone else want to make a motion for that? Craig, this is something
No, you need a second.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I said, can that constitute because being the official motion on my part? Okay. Yes. So do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Jim Johnson seconds. Motion made by Mike Foster. We'll do a roll call vote, starting with Natasha Edwards.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Carrie Lamson.
Recommend to approve.
Okay. Jana Reeves.
Same.
Mike Rowan.
Approve.
Jonathan Clayton.
Approve.
And
approve.
Okay. Passes unanimously. Recommended to the board to approve the amended public improvement variance. And I'm sure we'll have to do some explaining on that one at the board meeting, but that's fine.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. You all have to attend that meeting. You'll be there.
Just bring the standards for the sidewalks, Jay.
Gotcha. Yeah. I'll have those ready.
Okay. Real quickly, before we hopefully get a motion to adjourn, Jay, is there any update on holding in-person meetings again at this point from any of the boards?
So the council held its first hybrid meeting on Monday. It was the first in person at all, since this began in March, and it went pretty. I believe 4 or 5 of the council members in person, and then a few remote. I don't know if we've got the staff and the technology to do that for all boards, and really, I don't know that we're going to continue to do it for the council. So, my recommendation would be that you all continue to meet remotely for the time being. I think it's the smoothest and the easiest solution, but it certainly, if you want to try to go to a hybrid option, we would certainly accommodate it.
I'll just throw in my personal thoughts on this. I think until we make a decision to go back to full-on in-person meetings at Town Hall, we should probably continue it as is because it seems to be working. There are some disadvantages to it, but I think we've worked through them for the most part. And I don't think everybody is comfortable with going back in person at this point. And I would like the board to do everything one way instead of trying to break it up into 2 different formats within the same meeting. So any other comments on that?
I agree with everything you just said.
Okay. Too, Mike. I think until maybe through the town board, if they figure out what the hybrid and the technology needed to facilitate that properly.
Yeah, I just don't want to overly complicate things when they don't need to be.
I joked this morning, it felt kind of like a Radio Shack solution. We had speakers and microphones pointed into speakers, but somehow, lo and behold, it functioned. Now, I will add, the doors were shut to town hall, so it was still considered a remote meeting. We just had some of the council there in person. So we're not sure how we're going to handle the public hearings next month. We have our, zoning meeting. Just stay tuned.
Yeah, from what you just described, Jay, that's kind of messed up.
Yeah, it was an imperfect solution, but it did work. But given that it's a joint public hearing, I think it would be. I don't think it would be very difficult to accommodate all of council, all of planning board, and staff in the council chamber. I think it would be very, very difficult.
Some people pledge allegiance to the flag, and others pledge allegiance to the wall.
Yeah, I think at this point, this isn't broke, so let's not try to fix it. Okay. Before we go to our last step, Michael, Yuri, and John, thank you very much.
Y'all have a good night.
You too.
Thank y'all.
See you next month.
Bye-bye.
See you. Bye.
And do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll steal Jana's thunder. I motion to adjourn.
Yeah, you gave her a shot. We have a motion to adjourn from Natasha. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, Jana got in there. We have a motion and a second. We are officially adjourned. We will talk to you again next month.
We didn't vote on it.
Yes.
Oh, yes,
right.
yes. Jeez. See, I'm getting a little bit too much of a hurry now. Okay.
Acting like Jana.
Yeah. Natasha. Natasha Edwards.
Approve.
Okay. Carrie Lamson.
Yes, approve.
Give it some thought. Jana.
Yes.
All right. Mike Rowan.
Approve.
Jonathan Clayton.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And Jim Johnson.
Approved.
Okay. We are officially adjourned. Talk to you soon.
Jana, I
Good night,
watched your movie. Jana, I'm not sure you heard. I watched your movie, The Big Year. She probably.
Oh, you did?
It was good. Yeah, we loved it.
Oh, I'm so glad. It's so good. Yeah.
So keep sending recommendations.
Oh, good.
The Big Year.
It's
Bye.
Good night.
I don't want to keep going.